Call Ms. Wahala to move her notice of motion 719. Ms. Wahala.
President, I move motion number 719 standing in my name. I believe I have a duty to convey to the public my traumatic experience of being systematically bullied, harassed, and intimidated so that the political system, in particular the tribalism of the ALP, goes through cultural change. President, the ALP factional culture is toxic and corrosive. It is broken and badly in need of repair. As you will see, it is not conducive to women. I made my way into the party through being a community activist. I must admit, I did not know the party and its culture, let alone the factional system, when I went into parliament, and I still don't. The people that recruited me were from the socialist left, therefore, by extension, I was SL. Apparently, when you join the SL, you can't leave. My experience demonstrates that certain individuals seem to think that in the name of factional tribalism, all societal norms and standards are suspended, and that the Labour Party factions have a carve-out in law where everything goes, including all forms of bullying, intimidation, and harassment. When someone who has not grown up in the tribal factional culture is systematically targeted for leaving a faction as I was, the experience is traumatic, especially when your cries for help are ignored by those with the power to stop it, such as the Premier and his office. President, I was approached to stand for pre-selection by the right, who were looking for an educated woman candidate from an ethnic background. As soon as I nominated, I got an angry text message on 13th August 2018 from Ms. Gabrielle Williams, questioning my integrity and demanding an explanation. I thought it was strange that Ms. Williams thought that she has proprietorial rights over me. I didn't make too much of it at the time. Little did I know that the text message was opening salvo in the worst period of my life, and I don't say that lightly, since I've had many challenges in my life growing up in a small town in India. President, the night I was elected to Parliament in November 2018 was one of the happiest days of my life. I was proud of my achievements. I was proud to be the first person of Indian heritage to be elected to the Victorian Parliament. And the fact that I was a woman, I thought was even more significant and would help inspire other women from non-English speaking background to participate in the political process and empower them by giving them a voice. But my happiness was short-lived as a systematic bullying campaign soon began against me. Premier's advisor, Mr. Vinaya Kolape, and the Premier's close personal friend, Mr. Lucky Kohli, were ringleaders of a group of men who incessantly bullied, harassed, and intimidated me. At events, they would stand over me and invade my space, pointing, laughing, mocking, and sneering at me. Their campaign extended to spreading nasty rumors and excluding me from attending events and undermining my position to do my job. Their strategy was to bully, harass, and intimidate me to such a degree that I would simply walk away from politics. President, it is difficult to put into words how threatening the behavior of the group men was. The fact that they were so open in their hostility gave me a sense that there would be a physical element to it at some stage. I therefore felt scared and anxious in going to events and functions. I had to take my husband or staff with me at all times. This fear paralyzed me. I could not eat and sleep as my health suffered from the stress of being bullied and the fear of physical attack. Before I was elected, I was a strong and independent woman, but in a matter of months, I had become a nervous wreck. President, this fear was compounded when Mr. Kohli sent me a threatening text message at 2 a.m. in the morning on April 6, 2019. The text message woke me up and unsettled me. The text message was a further part of their bullying and intimidation campaign. On April 29, 2019, one of the men, named Ravi Raghupati, aligned with Mr. Kohli and Mr. Kolape, put up a post on social media calling me a circus monkey for leaving the SL. President, this harassment was the final straw. I had resisted complaining because I did not want to be seen as a whinger. However, I could not allow Mr. Kohli and Mr. Kolape to continue to ruin my life. On April 30th, 2019, I made my first complaint to PPO when I met with a senior member of the PPO named Mr. Ben Foster. On May 6, 2019, I texted Mr. Foster asking him to provide feedback on what action PPO had taken about the bullying complaint I made at our April 30th, 2019 meeting. On my insistence, we met later that day and I reinforced my bullying complaints against Mr. Kohli and Mr. Kolape. On May 22nd, 2019, I sent Mr. Foster another text message requesting feedback on what action PPO had taken in response to my complaints, as reiterated to him at our May 6th meeting about the bullying, harassment, and intimidation I was being subjected to. Mr. Foster's response to my text was to ignore the bullying complaints that I had been making to him and respond to a very minor matter that we had discussed in our previous meeting. When I refused to accept his diversion and pressed him on what action the PPO had taken on bullying complaint, Mr. Foster did not respond to my text message. On June 6, 2019, I sent Mr. Foster another text message, again requesting an update on what action PPO had taken concerning my complaints about Mr. Kohli and Mr. Kolape leading a group of men systematically bullying, harassing, and intimidating me. I did not get a response to this text message from Mr. Foster. Instead of taking action to deal with my bullying complaints, PPO and or the Premier punished me by excluding me from an important event for leaders of the Indian community hosted by the Premier in his private office on June 17, 2019. Whilst I was excluded, the men that had led a systematic bullying campaign against me were invited. On June 16, 2019, I sent a text message to Mr. Foster expressing my concern at being excluded and my bullies being invited. I did not receive an apology or any form of reply to my text message. President, I continued to make complaints because I was scared, not because I was crazy or irrational. I complained because I sensed that the bullying would lead to violence of some form at some stage. I feared that something was going to happen because their actions were openly hostile. On October 29, 2019, I sent a message to Mr. Foster complaining about the behavior of a man named Zishan Raza, who was associated with the SL and was part of a group of men that Mr. Kohli and Mr. Kolape led in their systematic bullying of me. I did not receive any response to this message and no action was taken by PPO. President, all my fears were realized on November 9, 2019 at an event where Mr. Kohli, Mr. Kolape and their friends had gathered again in a group, engaging in their usual intimidating behavior. This time, Mr. Raza suddenly broke away from the group and physically assaulted my husband. He grabbed my husband by the bicep and attempted to drag him outside, away from the sight of people. The man was in a state of rage. I was so terrified that I began to tremble. I have never experienced an assault or any other form of physical confrontation before, so it was a terrifying experience. The fact that I experienced this when I was an MP and after 7 months of continual request for help from the PPO made me very angry, because PPO and the Premier could have stopped the bullying campaign when I first complained in April 2019. On November 14, 2019, I met with Mr. Grant Williams and Mr. Christopher Pace from Parliamentary Security Services, who advised me to take out an intervention order against Mr. Raza. Mr. Williams also informed me that he had informed Mr. Foster at PPO to make sure that the SL advisors are aware of the security risks to me at events. My anxiety and fear had continued to rise and was at breaking point when, a week after the physical assault on my husband, on November 16, 2019, I was verbally assaulted and stood over at the ALP State Conference by a staff member working in the Premier's joint elected office with Mr. Jennings. President, while sitting in the conference floor, listening to the proceedings, I noticed a woman continuously pointing at me and calling me a rat. I left the conference floor because she would not stop harassing and embarrassing me. She looked like she was repulsed by the sight of seeing me, so I thought not having to see me would calm her down. Rather than stopping, the staffer followed me out of the conference floor, cornered me at the cafeteria, where she stood over me. While pointing aggressively at my chest, she continued to call me a rat, over and over again. I could not make sense of the treatment I was receiving. I am convinced they perpetuated such a vicious and systematic campaign because I am a woman and small in stature. I am certain that they would not have done this to a man. Before I left the SL, the Premier and I had a good relationship. We met when I was organizing the Little India campaign in Dandenong. As opposition leader, he was keen to be part of that campaign. However, when I became a member of his caucus, the Premier was a different man towards me. He was hostile, he would not speak or acknowledge me. He treated me like I was invisible. Despite knowing my bullying complaints against Mr. Kohli and Mr. Kolape and their friends, the Premier would brush past me at events and publicly embrace the bullies and their friends as if to reward and encourage their bullying behavior. President, on the advice of a parliamentary security team, on November 21, 2019, I took out an interim intervention order on the man that assaulted my husband. I thought, as the PPO is made aware of all this, it would finally bring an end to the campaign of bullying. I was wrong. On December 10, 2019, the assailant breached his intervention order by turning up to Parliament. He was secretly escorted into Parliament by an SL ministerial advisor who is aligned with Mr. Kohli and Mr. Kolape. President, the advisor had his security pass suspended for 3 months by Parliament, but the PPO took no action against the advisor. I did not receive an apology or an assurance that it would not happen again. I was at my wit's end. On December 19, 2019, I therefore sent a text message to the Chief of Staff of the Premier pleading for assistance, and the message read as follows. Thank you, Lissy, for returning my call today. I am sick and tired of these men trying to bully, harass, and intimidate me in all the ways they can. They are trying to defame me and malign my name. All these men are associated directly or indirectly with Premier's office. Zishan actually wants to hurt me and my family. I'm really scared for my safety. I really need your help for my and my family's safety. I have spoken to Ben, but nothing has eventuated from that. Before I speak to the Premier, as a last resort, I'm seeking your help to look into this matter. Please take required action. The court magistrate was very concerned about my safety when I sought the interim intervention order, looking at Zishan's behavior escalated in few days from sudden unnecessary praising to physically assaulting my husband at a public event. Thank you for your time. So, President, the Chief of Staff referred me to their in-house lawyer, who told me he could only deal with legal matter and his job was not staff management. I was discouraged by Ms. Marlene Khairuz from sending a letter I had written to the Premier directly. Ms. Khairuz advised that the SL and PPO would claim that I was trying to blow up the government since emails are often sent to be leaked or discovered by an FOI request. Ms. Khairuz instead volunteered to speak to PPO on my behalf. PPO told her that they understood the circumstances, but there was nothing that could be done about Mr. Kohli because he was the Premier's personal friend and that they too had problems with him. On January 26, 2020, I sent Mr. Foster a text message requesting once again seeking support for being bullied. On April 3, 2020, I got a full intervention order against Mr. Raza. Thereafter, we went into lockdown, so there was no action for an extended period. On May 12, 2021, I sent a text message to Mr. Foster for an update on what action they had taken to stop Mr. Kohli, Mr. Kolape, and their gang from bullying me. I sent this text message because we were emerging from lockdown and I was due to attend meetings and events. On May 14, 2021, I spoke again to the PPO in-house lawyer seeking support. On the same day, I also spoke to Mr. Foster about my bullying complaint. I felt that Mr. Foster either did not take my complaint seriously enough or he was facing internal resistance to dealing with it. I had had enough. On May 16, 2021, I emailed a 6-page letter containing all the complaints that we had previously discussed to Mr. Foster. On June 8, 2021, I had a meeting with Mr. Foster and Ms. Jessie Macron, who is the Deputy Chief of Staff to the Premier, in the presence of Ms. Sarah Connolly MP and Ms. Natalie Hutchins. In this meeting, I was not asked once what support they can provide for harassment and bullying help. On June 22, 2021, I sent Mr. Foster a text message asking what action had been taken following our June 8th meeting. I received no response to this text message. On July 29, 2021, I called Mr. Foster, but he did not take my call. I then sent him a text message asking for an update. Again, he did not respond to my text message. There was no contact by PPO over August and September 2021. I also asked my colleagues, Ms. Connolly and Ms. Hutchins, whether they had heard any news, and they both replied that they had not. On October 7th, 2021, I texted Ms. Hutchins to ask whether she had been provided any updates since our June 8, 2021 meeting. On October 28, 2021, I met with Ms. Hutchins to seek her support in further dealing with PPO. On October 28, 2021, I sent an email to Ms. Macron requesting an update to our June 8, 2021 meeting. On October 28, 2021, I received a reply to my email from Ms. Macron stating that Mr. Kolape would be moved to other office duties. On November 5, 2021, time options were offered to me for catch-up by PPO, but I didn't want to meet with them alone as I had lost trust in PPO's intentions. I tried to coordinate the diaries of Ms. Hutchins, Ms. Connolly, and the PPO availability. President, I would like to stress here that the MPs I enlisted the support of, including Ms. Kairos, Ms. Connolly, and Ms. Hutchins, were trying to assist me in my dealings with PPO. I wish to put on record that they acted in good faith and had no authority to take action. President, only after I made public my bullying complaint in February 2022 did I find out that Mr. Kolape had been sacked by PPO in November 2021. At no point did they inform me that they had sacked him. Further, I did not get an apology for the 2.5 years that Mr. Kohli and Mr. Kolape was left to bully me. I still have not got any feedback on what action the Premier has taken with his personal friend and his participation in the bullying behavior. President, Ms. Williams' angry text message when I got pre-selected was a sign of things to come. Throughout the period I've been in Parliament, Ms. Williams has behaved appallingly. For 3.5 years, she has referred to me as a rat who cannot be trusted. This childish behavior extended to official events where she refused to acknowledge me, including events celebrating women, with me being the only other MP present. Ms. Williams has not spoken a word to me for the 3.5 years that we have been in Parliament together. When we are in a group situation, she makes a point of trying to isolate me. Some might dismiss her behavior as a juvenile response to separation and more fitting behavior in a schoolyard. But we are adults and we are in a real-life workplace where it is not okay to undermine, isolate, and exclude. Given the systematic bullying conducted by Mr. Kolape and Mr. Kohli, I believe Ms. Williams was part of the campaign. Ms. Williams often says, words matter. My word, they do, Minister, and so does behavior. The Premier referring to me as that person summed up his 3 years of interaction with me. By calling me that person, he stripped me of my name and my identity, therefore making me feel worthless. Exactly how he made me feel in the 3 years of interactions I've had with him. Leaders set the culture and standards of organization. The Premier made it very clear that I was persona non grata after I left the SL, and the rest felt they had a license to go after me. The fact the Premier and his Treasurer questioned my psychological well-being after I made my complaint public speaks volumes. I am sick of women being characterized as mad, crazy, or irrational whenever they complain. There are women who may be experiencing bullying behavior right now who will think twice after witnessing the brutal victim blaming that the Premier and the Treasurer engaged in because I dared to complain. President, all the text messages and emails referred to in my statement have been retained and will be handed to WorkSafe this week. President, I have given the House a well-documented factual account of my horrendous experience of being systematically bullied for 3 years. I do not consider this a matter for debate. Therefore, I do not propose to sum up should members wish to speak to the motion. Thank you.